Welcome to this EDUcast, sponsored by Nectar and Telecom Reseller. Microsoft Teams, Advanced Troubleshooting and Analytics. And why this is important with all the people that are working from home, COVID-19 has spawned a significant growth in collaboration traffic. This traffic means that more simultaneous sessions can tax the quality of the sessions. Users complain that poor sessions are tiring, annoying, take too long, concentration wanders, and it's frustrating. One of the surprises I discovered is that many who try to connect to these sessions were denied access far more frequently than in the past. This demands greater visibility and granularity of the environment. Analysis tools will have to be expanded. So let's talk about that. Previously, meeting usage at organizations was tripling every 24 months. Since the beginning of the pandemic, it has skyrocketed. The total number of meeting participants has gone up roughly 460% in a matter of weeks, as I reported in my blog, posted at NoJitter, titled Measuring Quality of Collaboration Sessions. You can see a link to that blog at the bottom of this page. The quality of video meetings have deteriorated during the pandemic period for users on both cloud and premise-based platforms. In addition, there is evidence that call failures and abandonment, that is when users have to dial back in, has increased over this time period as well. UCaaS experienced a more significant proportion of bad quality call experiences for conferencing and meeting than on-premises technologies. The increase started in mid-March, but has continued to increase significantly through mid-May. There's been a definite increase in the large size of meetings. While the overall breakdown of meetings by size remains proportionally similar to that before the COVID-19 pandemic, there is a noticeable significant increase in meetings of larger sizes. Meetings with 6 and more have risen in number, meetings above 10 even more, meetings above 21 even more than that. The largest jump is in meetings above 50 participants, which indicates large-scale events, departmental and company meetings being held online. What this also means is the number of people who are frustrated with the poor quality has actually increased as well. So Tim, one of the growth areas in conferencing technologies has been Microsoft Teams. What have people seen as the value of implementing Teams conferencing?
I think that the immediate draw to Teams, you really have to separate into two different categories. There's conferencing, but then there's also the Pstn calling that is enabled through Teams as well. So let's answer that first from the conferencing perspective. Whereas there was interest prior to COVID in people moving to Teams because it is a Microsoft product and Microsoft always generates interest in their product, I would say that Teams adoption was relatively slow prior to COVID, at least from our perspective. We were seeing it happen, but we weren't seeing it happen as quickly as I'm sure Microsoft would have wanted. But you're absolutely right, Gary. There's no question that that when everyone started to shift to work from home, it meant overnight, in some cases, quite literally overnight migrations to Microsoft Teams. And I think that the main advantage that offered was to take away the limits of on-prem infrastructure to support that many remote users. Nobody's enterprise data center designed collaboration platform was designed to support remote users when not to support this high percentage of remote users, right? You might have sort of depending on your organization, 10 to 20% of your users are going to be remote, maybe a little bit higher, but nobody was planning on 100% of your users being remote, and so you just didn't design the bandwidth, you didn't design the infrastructure to support that many remote users. Whereas with cloud, by definition, everyone is remote. And so I think that the model of being able to move to Teams, because of it just being as a cloud service, no requirement on on-prem infrastructure, just became a really compelling and valuable solution for people who had to immediately enable 100% of work from home.
I thought this was very interesting, and Microsoft and other cloud providers have made it clear that most of the responsibility for end user experience remains with the enterprise. What does that enterprise need to do?
This is something that we talk about quite often because there has been a perception for some time that if you move your collaboration to the cloud, that you're basically letting Microsoft or whomever your cloud provider be take over those problems. You know, if you're having issues with poor quality, that if you move to the cloud, that, well, it's their problem now. And clearly that's not the case, right? I was on a call the other day with a client who was a significant large enterprise who was sort of joking about the fact that their CEO had a bad call, and they called Microsoft to open up a trouble ticket because their CEO had a bad call on Teams. And of course, Microsoft, doesn't, individual end user support like that for call quality issues is not necessarily something that they are well equipped, within their own support organization to deal with individual end users. And so IT organizations still need to be able to support their own end users. And so you still need tooling, you still need insights, you still need visibility into what's going on in that cloud environment and what's going on with user experience in the cloud environment in order to be able to support your end users. And even Microsoft is very clear about this. Their job is the uptime of the platform, the Office 365 service as well, along with some basic service management, but the health of the network, the health of the endpoint environment, that still very much remains a customer responsibility.
Would you provide more insights into the voice and video session analytics then?
Yeah, so right now where I think most of the interest is around, in the context of troubleshooting, is understanding what's going on at a high level. And so we would refer to that as session summary dashboards, but then also being able to drill down into specific views. And that is a very common workflow. And that workflow might start with something like, hey, I want to see all my locations, or I want to see kind of the basic geography of known locations. Work from home obviously complicates this, but I want to see kind of the known locations and drill down and understand how are people doing based on what location they're connecting out of. And then I want to understand what's their call quality, what's their user experience. And then I want to drill down to those that are having a poor user experience, and I want to understand what's going on with those. Or I want to look at something like time of day volumes and then drill down and say, okay, well, as my volume peaks, my quality, what does that do to my quality of experience? And let's kind of drill down on those that are having poor quality experience and get down and figure out what's causing that. So there's a lot of workflows around troubleshooting and analytics that need to be supported right now in work from home. We break it down into these kind of 5 categories. Session summary dashboards, which again is that global view I was talking about, but then session detail views allow you to look at a specific call, a specific set of users in a conference perhaps. When did people join? When did they drop off? Did they try and join multiple times? Was it clear that a user joined for a minute, dropped, rejoined for a minute, dropped? These kinds of session details we can see and have the ability to expose the analytics on. So all of that, and then you get down to adoption and usage too, because when people are working from home, typically management wants to know, what are people working on? How many people are collaborating? What's going on? What are people trying to do? And so this is where Nectar has focused, and we believe we have the the leading offer right now on Microsoft Teams Analytics.
One of the points you made a little earlier is talking about the PSTN, and I imagine we're getting more people calling in on the PSTN necessarily than compared to, let's say, who are with soft clients. So we get into this question. What does direct routing PSTN monitoring actually do, since a lot of people are using that right now, the PSTN to join the conference?
Well, and PSTN calling in Teams is definitely falls into one of 2 camps. So smaller organizations, if they're in a geography where Microsoft supports this, may choose to make their PSTN calls, make and receive their PSTN calls via what's called a Microsoft calling plan. So if you want to buy your telco minutes from Microsoft and get your PSTN directly through them in the cloud, you certainly can do that, right? And that's through a calling plan. What we're finding is that for a lot of larger organizations, multi-location global organizations in many cases, or organizations that live in parts of the world where Microsoft doesn't yet support calling plans. They're taking advantage of something called direct routing. And direct routing, for those of you, those in your audience who know Teams, they'll be very familiar with this concept, but direct routing is essentially you can bring your own SIP trunking, you can bring your own telco services to Microsoft's cloud so that your tenant in Microsoft's cloud is connected to some dedicated telco facilities that either you host or your partner hosts, but you can imagine that there's going to be an SBC, and that SBC, that session border controller, is going to connect up to Microsoft's cloud, and that infrastructure is dedicated to your environment. So in direct routing, we focus on two things. We focus on monitoring of the SBC itself and the SIP trunk, and so we're focused on SBC performance, utilization, availability, all those kinds of things that you would want to focus on for on-prem infrastructure, as well as SIP trunk performance. And so that is kind of the overall health of the platform. How's it doing? What's going on? And that becomes key for Pstn availability, not just for conferencing, but for people that are using Teams potentially for customers dialing in to DIDs, and that's a high percentage of very high value traffic for a lot of organizations.
Well, that goes into the next question. Is we're talking about diagnostics related to that. What can I learn from your about Teams that I might not have known before?
Well, that's the other half of this Pstn conversation. So the first half is what we just talked about, which is how's the SIP trunk, how's the SBC performing, how's everything doing from a health and performance standpoint. This side of the coin is very much session related, and this is the ability to troubleshoot individual calls that are traversing this direct routing infrastructure, this SBC up to Microsoft's cloud. And right now, Nectar is to my knowledge, the only provider in the market that is able to see Teams Pstn calls and direct routing in real time. So when a call is set up, goes across the SBC, we can provide diagnostics and insight into what's going on in that call. And we see two legs of that call, which is interesting. Of course, you see the leg going out to the Pstn, which is the leg that you'd expect to see. And then we also see the leg going up to Microsoft's Pstn hub in the cloud. And so there's the SBC is managing both sides of that, and so you need to be able to do that session troubleshooting on both sides of the SBC.
On the next slide, you talk about 4 tools. Would you provide some insights into those 4 tools and how they relate to what you're talking about?
Absolutely, and this is really just Nectar's primary portfolio of tools that people can use in a wide variety of multi-vendor, hybrid, on-premise, cloud type environments, and it gets after the specific workloads that we enable. So Foundation is around dashboards, alerting, reporting, and things that you would use for managing the overall performance over time. Very important for operations teams that might be taking care of Office 365 or other technologies, other platform-based collaboration environments. Diagnostics is a little bit different. Diagnostics is a workload that's focused on not so much proactive work, but troubleshooting. So we had a bad call, and that's what's new for Teams, right? Is the ability to go in and troubleshoot Teams calls using third-party tools like Nectar. That has not largely been available in any reliable way until quite recently, just in the last month or so. And so being able to go in and troubleshoot Teams calls, and that's enabled by both Nectar technology as well as an API that's now publicly available from Microsoft via the Graph API. So we use that in both our Foundation and Diagnostics approach. Perspective and CX Assurance represent a different value proposition that is relevant for Teams as well as for Contact Center in testing published numbers. Perspective is around checking to make sure that your network is healthy, that you can handle the bandwidth for voice and video. That's just around looking at key performance indicators like jitter, packet loss, quality of service type factors. CX Assurance is a testing tool that comes at it from a different angle. Now we're actually testing the availability of phone numbers by actually dialing in over the Pstn, testing those phone numbers, and then testing your prompts, your auto attendants, your IVRs, your contact center platforms. And that's relevant for everything from dial-in conference bridges to make sure that dial-in conferencing is available, all the way through to the most advanced contact center environments in the world.
When I look at those tools, I wonder, how well have the Nectar collaboration tools been received by the market?
We've been quite successful over the years in bringing on a lot of large organizations that are using our tools on a day-to-day basis, as well as a lot of service provider partners that are using our tools to provide managed services to their customers. And we're seeing increase in interest from organizations of all sizes who just simply realize that they need some sort of third-party analytics. They need monitoring, alerting. They want to be able to do troubleshooting, and certainly I think people are recognize the efficiency of doing testing, particularly when it comes to testing phone numbers in contact center and IVR environments.
You're talking here about the Nectar difference, but also could you tell us a little bit about the dashboards we're looking at?
Absolutely. So I mentioned early on that one of the key scenarios or workflows that people want to follow is to look at a geography, and one of the things we expose is the opportunity to take every one of your locations, every known location that you have, and map that subnet to a geographic point on a map. And so if we take a subnet that might be assigned to an office or a remote site that your organization manages, whatever that might be, everything from a kind of 2-person operation to a 20,000 person headquarters, might be anything in between. We've got the opportunity to present that on a map in the context of user experience, and so that's in the upper left-hand corner. You can quickly identify those user experiences, seeing it geographically on a map, and that's a really common and nice workflow. The other workflows are really about being able to spot trends and dig into specific details on a call. I want to go in and see what elements of a call were good and what elements of a call were poor. And the best example that I give for that really tends to be around conference calls. When you have a conference call, everyone's perception of the quality of that call is very different. And Microsoft Teams is no different. When I'm working from home and I join a Teams call, my own experience is not necessarily what everyone else on the call is experiencing. I might be the one talking a lot on that conference call, and I have no idea that my performance is poor from a network perspective, and everyone else struggling to understand what I say because they're having to piece it together. Well, I don't experience that because when other people talk, I'm hearing them fine. So that unique experience everyone has on a conference call is something that we've found a way to expose in a really simple and easy to understand way through our analytics, and be able to jump in and say, hey, look, the call was fine for everyone, but the organizer had a really bad connection. So it was perceived as poor for everyone, but we really only have one user to troubleshoot here.
Let's take a look at the demonstration video that's coming next, and then we'll come back when the video is done.
Nectar 10 is Nectar's next-generation cloud-based analytics platform. Nectar 10 gathers call details and quality analytics from Cisco, Skype for Business, Microsoft Teams, and others. We're going to show you how Nectar 10 can help your company easily spot global call quality trends and troubleshoot individual calls and conferences with just a few mouse clicks. When you first log into your Nectar 10 tenant, you'll be greeted with a summary screen that shows you the volume of calls and related call quality across your company in near real time. The map shows the number of calls that have taken place over the past hour, day, week, or month. You can show or hide locations as desired. For example, you may only be interested in seeing calls for European locations and can hide locations that may serve as a distraction. The left side of the screen shows a tabular list of all locations, the average call quality, and the quality trend over the selected time frame. This list can also be customized to only show locations of interest. Below the map is a session timeline chart that shows the volume of each session modality across the chosen time frame. You can show or hide session modalities so you can focus only on specific modalities. For example, we can just show audio and video modalities so that we can see how often video is used along with audio calls. The map is very useful to get a big picture view of call volume and quality. The size of the circle represents call volume relative to other locations. Call quality is shown as a colored ring. This makes it very easy to see where quality issues are happening. The circles may represent calls from multiple locations. This is done to prevent visual overload from showing too many circles at the same time. If you zoom into a particular area, you will see bigger circles separate and resolve into smaller ones. Clicking on a circle will show you the name of the location and the total number of good, poor, and unknown calls. If a circle contains calls from multiple locations, clicking the circle will show all the locations and the call breakdown within. It's clear there are quality issues in Southeast Asia based on the size of the red portion of the circles in the region. Zooming in, the area with the most calls and the worst quality appears to be in Thailand. Clicking the circle confirms that half of Bangkok's calls are qualified as poor. Clicking on a location name will open up the call details screen for the selected location. This screen allows administrators to see a list of calls and conferences that match a set of applied filters. By default, Nectar 10 shows filters for time period, modality, location, session type, quality, platform, and duration. There are many more filter options available. The sessions chart shows a session timeline broken down by modalities such as audio, video, and app sharing, which can be turned on and off as desired. This section shows summary information about each modality broken down by session type. From here, administrators can spot trends and get an overall sense of usage and quality. For the Bangkok location, we can clearly see that most of the calls were either Pstn or peer-to-peer calls with very little conference traffic. Of those peer-to-peer and Pstn calls, a good percentage of them were rated poor. The average round-trip delay is very high, which is the main reason for the poor rating for these calls. Scrolling further down, we can see all the calls that match the applied filters, which is currently set to show sessions to or from users in the Bangkok office. There are a large number of poor calls shown here. We can further narrow the scope to only show poor calls by simply adding a quality filter. This makes it extremely easy to locate exactly who is experiencing poor call quality. The quality summary information updates to show metrics that match the current filter selection. Click on a call in the session list to see detailed information. Nectar 10 is easy to use for everyone from first-level help desk to third-level engineers. The root cause is spelled out in plain English for help desk people who may not be familiar with call quality terminology. The biggest issues are highlighted in the Session Alerts section. Additional details about the user's devices, the infrastructure used for the call, and the network are presented in an easily digestible format. A complete set of quality metrics are available for advanced troubleshooting. All metrics that exceed their thresholds are highlighted. Diagnostics messages, which can be useful for advanced troubleshooting, are also available. Conferences are a frequent source of complaint. Nectar 10 makes it easy to show a list of all conferences where administrators can locate specific conferences that appear to be particularly hard hit by quality issues. The quality bar shows which conferences had a higher proportion of poor sessions. The conference detail view shows a Gantt chart of the conference. It clearly shows when people joined a conference and what modalities were used. In this particular case, it appears that many video sessions experienced poor quality. Clicking on an individual participant's name will show only their sessions, and clicking on a session will bring up the session detail screen similar to the one shown on a peer-to-peer call. In this case, it appears the poor video session quality was caused by a platform issue. If we drill into the conference server status for the time the conference was active, we can see that metrics for dropped network packets are unacceptably high. This warrants further investigation into this particular conference server.
What is the difference between Nectar 10 and Microsoft Teams and the Admin Center and call quality dashboards that Microsoft has?
We get this question quite a lot because the Microsoft Teams Admin Center and the Call Quality Dashboard do provide some level of insight into what's going on in a Teams environment. My position on this, and I think the way to really think about this is what is the job that you're trying to get done. Our tool is purpose-built for people who need to be able to support an environment either in an IT operations standpoint with use cases around analytics and reporting to trouble tickets and being able to resolve issues and troubleshooting. That is really what we're purpose-built for, whereas I would say the Teams Admin Center, by its own name, is designed primarily for administration. So it's about turning on features. It's about provisioning your tenant. It's about, kind of making sure that users are set up with the right credentials, etc. And while you can look up a user there and see a call history for a user, it is really an environment that is designed around user administration, not so much about troubleshooting and being able to see what's going on in the overall environment. So for real efficient operations, I think you want to look for a tool that is purpose-built for running the environment, not just setting it up and configuring it. That goes through to everything to making sure that I've got the right credentials to get to those screens, as well as being able to take a look at something like multi-vendor or hybrid environments, where I've also got to understand what's the health of my SBC in a Teams environment because I'm using direct routing. Well, Microsoft's not going to expose that, so you'd have to bounce over to a different tool, whereas with Nectar, we can bring that together. And I think that's the primary value proposition. From a user experience standpoint, though, what I think the most important difference is the idea that I want to start with a global view of what's going on in my environment, and I want to drill all the way down to a set of specific calls or a set of specific users that are potentially having a poor experience. And that idea of a global environment health is presented in Microsoft's Call Quality Dashboard, but you can't drill into it. You can't ever see the calls that actually contributed to the poor calls that show up on the dashboard. Whereas with Nectar, we've built that global down to granular view, that 50,000 foot down to 1 foot view.
The next slide has a comparison table. Would you continue the discussion comparing Nectar 10 and what Microsoft offers?
I won't go through all of these points. I think that would take more time than we have, but I'm happy to highlight a couple for sure. I think that there's some things that people do want to focus on around reporting and the ability to customize reports and have them automatically emailed to you, because in your job you may have the responsibility on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis to provide insights to your management. That's something that's uniquely enabled by Nectar as an example. The ability to see the performance of the SBC, again, uniquely enabled in the context of Teams by Nectar. The ability to filter call records easily to get to the list that you want. That's a unique one. One that we sort of cross over on is the compatibility with Power BI, and that is a tool that a lot of people do want to use to go in and, if you will, slice and dice their call data. And certainly Teams Microsoft has done quite a lot of work to enable that, and they've built some Power BI dashboards to be able to pull things out. But again, you're not necessarily getting the full picture there. We also have that our entire UI is powered by APIs that you can write PowerShell commandlets against and pull all those call analytics out, right down to the conference level views.
I'd like to thank you for this enlightening presentation. If you look at this screen now, you'll see some resources for Nectar 10 for Microsoft. And thank you, Tim, for your participation. I hope to talk to you again soon.
It's always great to talk to you, Gary. Thank you.